For years, people have been questioning welcoming signs to Ipswich, saying birthplace of American independence. Some people thought it was kind of a poor attempt at a joke, but we're with our town historian, Mr. Gordon Harris, who is going to explain why this is rooted in fact.
Okay, well, it goes back to Ipswich being part of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and we were kind of left on our own for a while because there's a little thing happened in England called the English Civil War. The throne was finally given back to Charles II, and after a while he started saying, where's all that money that the Ipswich, Massachusetts Bay Colony is supposed to be paying us, you know, in royalties and things like that? We become self-governed. We were taxing ourselves, governing ourselves, and England wasn't paying attention, but suddenly they were. King Charles sent a fellow named Andros, Edmund Andros, to become the governor of not only Massachusetts, but the Dominion of Massachusetts, which included New York State and Maine. And one of the first things he did is he proclaimed that all the land rights were abolished, that the system by which people had gotten their homelands, their farms, was invalid, and people had to apply again for land. Of course, they would have to pay for it.
It was a shakedown for money.
It was a shakedown. Yes,
Okay,
the king
right,
wanted the
right.
money. The big challenge came then when he ordered that every town appoint a tax collector and then assess the value of all the people's properties and begin collecting taxes. We'd never done it that way.
What date are we talking?
1687. He landed in Boston in 1686, declared himself to be the governor of Massachusetts. It was a town meeting, August 1687. Here's how it came about. In Tobacco, which is Essex, it's kind of a hothead minister down there named the Reverend John Wise, and he did not like this at all. One of the stories is he got on his horse and he rode into town because Essex was part of Ipswich, and he met with John Appleton, who was the town clerk at the time, and Samuel Appleton, his brother. They said, this will not pass. The reason we're standing right here, we're here on Town Hall, is this is actually where the town hall was, or the townhouse as they call it.
I mean, this was the center of town.
In 1800s,
right?
yeah,
Town
the church
hall.
was there just like it is now.
Okay.
They called a town meeting, and it was unanimous.
Okay.
The people of Ipswich, just like the people of Ipswich today, don't want to pay taxes. And they certainly didn't want anybody telling them how to pay their taxes, and so they refused. The town of Ipswich refused to appoint a tax collector, and it refused to go along with any of it. So Andros sent his soldiers to Ipswich, and they arrested Samuel Appleton and John Wise, the minister, and John Appleton, Samuel's brother, and John Andros, took them all to Boston. And there they sat in the jail for about a month or so, and eventually they made the plea, and they. I
mean, were they tried, or were they just thrown in the clink?
It wasn't a real trial by your peers by any means. There was one holdout, and that was Samuel Appleton. So he wintered over in the jail. Eventually, after about 6 months, they worked out an arrangement, and he left. This was the beginning of the revolt against Andros. I guess the very first town to refuse was Taunton. And their town clerk was arrested and then apparently not punished very much. But this town, Ipswich, was the rabble-rouser town for all this area. Then not only did they refuse to collect taxes, but they sent people to Topsfield and Raleigh and said, come on, let's all get together and do this thing. You know, so we were dangerous. Ipswich was a danger to Andros and the throne. Okay, fast forward a couple of years. 1689. Finally, the people of Boston have had enough. And a little thing happened too. King Charles II had died. His brother James had come to the throne. Andros was appointed by King James, so they saw he was vulnerable, and the people of Boston rose up and threw him in jail. So for a couple of years there, we went back to having the old Massachusetts Bay Colony arrangement, and eventually a sort of a compromise was worked out.
What happened to Andros? I mean,
Andros was sent back to Britain. He sat in prison on one of the islands outside of Boston. The Appleton family story is that Samuel Appleton, who, as I said, sat in jail for so long, was asked to come to Boston to personally escort Andros. Whether or not that's true or not, I don't know.
Good yarn.
Yeah. The town has claimed itself to be the birthplace of American independence, and the books say the same thing. And as we walk around town, we're going to find, that there's a lot of reminders of that particular day. You want to go for a little stroll? Let's go.
Move.
All right, we're standing in front of the John Appleton House here at 2 North Main Street, right at Market Square.
John or Sam?
This is John.
John, okay.
This is John. Now, it was built right about 1702 or so. So John Appleton built this after the Andross Rebellion.
Who's the farm Appleton?
Sorry?
Who's the farm Appleton?
That's the same family. Samuel Appleton, #1, the first settler, came here with his sons, John and Sam.
Okay.
And they came from Waldingfield, England. And that's why we have a road there.
Waldingfield Road.
Waldingfield Road, right?
Okay.
So he built this house. Actually, it was a 3-story house at one time. When he built it, it was the first 3-story house in town. And the roof was lowered, actually, by a subsequent owner. You see this house in all the earliest photos, like when Central Street burned to the ground. There's the John Appleton House, somehow survived the fire. And then it almost didn't survive the automotive age. What happened, I believe it was the 1960s, one of the large gas companies, Texaco, I believe, bought the house and was going to put a service station right here.
I remember that.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So well, the people in town wouldn't hear that either. We also have the home of Samuel Appleton. Actually, it's his son, Samuel. The senior Samuel, who first moved here, they were given houses lots in town, so he built a house about where the Ipswich Depot is now.
Who gave the?
Okay, so the Puritans, they wanted the best people, the brightest, the best, and the wealthiest people to come to Ipswich. So they would give lots. They also gave them huge, huge farm lots. And that's how the Appletons got their land here, because they were successful in England. They thought they would bring success here, and they were right. Now there's a mural down at the post office I'd like to show you.
Do it.
Yeah. Behind us is a mural that was painted by during the WPA days in 1930 by a guy named Saul Levine, and it commemorates the Revolt of 1687. If you look at the mural, they all look exactly the same. So apparently Saul Levine was good at drawing one face.
Okay, all
He
right.
got the
One
job.
model, he had one
got
model.
The job, and
All
so
right,
that same
all right.
mural's been there on the wall since 1930.
All right, we're giggling a little bit because we're having some technical problems, but hopefully we're overcoming them. We have now segued from the post office down to EBSCO, and in prior shows we've shown you this mural. If you've never seen the mural, you ought to come down here. But with that, I want to let Gordon take it away.
This is Edmund Andros. Alan Pearsall painted this mural about 10 years ago now, and he told me that everybody in the mural is somebody who lives in town. So I don't know who Edmund Andros or any of the other people are. I recognize a few of the people on this. Well, what we have here is Andros, and then the two soldiers, the two of the soldiers, and the Appleton brothers, John Andrews, being arrested and taken to Boston for trial. Now, step back a little bit here, because there's something else that happened about that time. We're talking 1687 was when the revolt happened in Ipswich. 1689 is when, in Boston, Andros was overthrown. But remember, there was only a couple of years later that the Salem witchcraft trials began. And Ipswich is somewhat complicit, because we held a lot of those accused here in the Ipswich jails. So right above the Andros scene is the witchcraft scene. And this is Elizabeth Howe from out on Linebrook Road being arrested and charged with witchcraft, and she was one of the first people hung. So you may say, well, what's the connection? Why are you bringing these two things up? And what I've read, and I think this makes a lot of sense, is when Andros declared all of the land rights to be null and void, that people had to apply for land again, that they didn't really own the homes that they're living in. And then when the government was overthrown, and then they were taxed, all of these things were very stressful to a very young community here, you know, only been here since 1634, so 50, 60 years. Everything was thrown up in the air, and it brought out the very worst. It brought out the people who were angry at the government at the time, and there were indeed, just like in the Revolution, there were people, they call them Tories in the Revolution, there were people who said, you know, let's not do this. This is going to cause problems. But the people who, like Wise and the Appletons, who led the rebellion, actually were called liberals. That's what they called them at that time. So what you have is out at with Elizabeth Howe living out on Linebrook. Her neighbors, the Purley family at the time, accused her of bewitching their child, and she was married to a man named Howe who had gone blind. She was running the farm. It was very unusual for women to be in charge of a farm or in charge of anything in a male-dominated society. They saw this as an opportunity for a land grab. Get rid of her, you get the land for cheap. And it wasn't just here. This is what happened with a lot of the very first witchcraft accusations, perhaps in historical hindsight. But also something that was going on was we were back at war yet again. Once Andros had began to change the balance of power in Maine, which was part of Massachusetts at the time, the Indians, the French saw this as yet another opening, and yet again another fight with the French and English over land in Massachusetts, and people here seeing their kids once again going off to war. So it was a very, very heady time. We have witchcraft, we have a revolt, we have wars, all happening in a period of about 1 decade. And one of the bizarrest things that happened, actually in between the Andros Revolt, 1690, and 1692, when most of the witchcraft accusations were happening, was in Gloucester. People in Gloucester began to see ghosts outside of their houses, specters they call them, and they would shoot their guns at the specters, and the specter would just run away. Some people said, well, it must be the Indians. And some people said, no, it's the French are here. The French are doing this. Nobody ever figured out who they were, but Samuel Appleton, he was a major, and he took a battalion of Ipswich men to Gloucester to try to help the people of Gloucester fight these things that they couldn't see.
Ghostbusters.
Yeah. When the Salem witchcraft trials began to turn around, and the people began to question, John Wise had already spoken very, very strongly against the witchcraft trials. They had one last trial, and it was in Ipswich. It was in Ipswich, and it was only, you know, a year and a half, say, later after the whole thing had gotten started. It was held at the location where that sign was, where we first got started with our program today, and all of the accused were acquitted, which had never happened in Salem. Now, these bewitched girls, they came to Ipswich during the midst of this, and the people of, what Thomas Franklin Waters wrote was that the people of Ipswich met him at the bridge. It's not the Choate Bridge, but it's where the Choate Bridge is. It said, go home. You know, so
we don't want your type.
Yeah, we don't want this. Last stop on our little tour here. It's called the Shoreborne Wilson House because Shoreborne Wilson is the person who built it in 1695, I think. But Samuel Appleton, the son of Samuel Appleton, the revolter, so this is the third Samuel Appleton, bought this house in 1702, and he lived here off and on for about 20 years, and it stayed in the Appleton family, I think, until the 1800s. As a matter of fact, the Appletons at one time owned all the way down the street, just about to the Ipswich Museum. Now, behind this building, was another building. It's not the same one that's there now, and I don't know much about it, but I think maybe Paul can tell us.
Yes, actually I haven't thought about this for years. Go ahead and rekindle an old memory. Behind me used to be what was called the King's Rook, and in the 60s it was an old-time folk coffee house, and it was very safe. The parents had no qualms about us letting us go on a Friday night. We'd come down, we'd get a cappuccino and play chess. We thought we were cool. Maybe carried a Ginsberg poetry book or something, you know, Larry Ferlinghetti. But it was actually quite a base for up and rising folk singers. Jackie Washington was the guy who did make it a little bit in Boston, but Tom Rush appeared here. You did mention Joan Baez. I think that's... Maybe. She did appear at the Castle
Okay, maybe that's
because
what
I
it
saw her
was, yeah,
there.
yeah.
But it was great entertainment, and it was cheap. You know,
Right here.
you blew $1.25 for the cappuccino or something. You know, and it was a lot of fun. And I wish some of that innocence could come back here.
Let's open it up, Paul.
All right. We'll do an art cinema or something. But anyhow. All right, we want to thank our friend Gordon Harris. He's become a regular on this program. We have a lot of fun. I've been around this town forever, but I'm constantly learning new stuff, and certainly you tickled my memory with that reference to the old coffee house. But anyhow, we've said this before in other shows. If you have any things you'd like to hear us talk about or discuss or research, please call us. Let us know, all right? We'd be happy to do it.
And don't forget to send them to my website, or the Historical Commission website. I like to call it my website,
Right, it is.
historicipswich.org.
Okay. C'est la vie.